Hey drawing friends, today we're going to tackle the daisy. I love daisies, they're so cool. They're super happy and really cute, but they're also made up of thousands of tiny flowers in the center and then another group of flowers around the edges. So this is called the disc florets, and then these are the ray florets. So these two different kind of flowers together as one create the epic daisy. Now, as usual, if you would like to download the PDF that goes along with this class, and you'll get two different views for this one, you can see that in the description below. And also on Instagram, we have a draw along where you can check out everyone's drawings from this class, but also you can add your own and feel super cool because you drew a flower. And last thing, all of the supplies that I used in this class are listed down in the description below. Apparently, the description box has lots of good stuff in it, so you should check it out. All right, let's get started. Okay, so as usual, I have some images that I licensed from Adobe Stock, and this is just to show you how I kind of translate something from life into an illustration, because the best thing to do when you're drawing is to simplify everything into basic shapes instead of getting caught up in all the different details. And so what I like to do is kind of start with a sketch that shows you the bounding box of general shapes and then slowly adding in detail as you go. So if you haven't seen the first video in this floral drawing series, I recommend checking that out because I basically break everything down into saucers, cups, and oranges. And the daisy is a really good flower to break down, the flower into those shapes. You'll see that in this lovely little plate that I have that I drew on with a paint marker. I'm my own boss. I'm an adult now. I can draw on my plates, you know. But yeah, this is just to show you how, the bounding box of the daisy is the outside of this plate or saucer. And you can see how if it becomes a 3/4 view, that this back edge here becomes longer and sort of smaller, and then this front edge is getting foreshortened. So whenever you see a 3/4 view, you'll just kind of see these front petals start to get squashed, and they might even become wider as they come towards the viewer, and then these will get thinner as they go back into space. And side view of the daisy, you can see that you start to see the underbelly of those petals, and then you no longer see these back petals. So it's just a very handy thing to kind of keep very simple objects in mind when you're drawing flowers. This is my paint, water paint cup, but this is another example of, this would make a great daisy that's kind of still blossoming. And you could use something like this and draw the petals in it to kind of show you how a daisy might interact in space. Okay, let's get serious now. Check out this daisy though, right there. You see that one? There's like a bowl upside down on a saucer, and it's just like, it's totally like the first video in my class. I'm telling you, there's kitchen objects in all flowers. You can find them. You'll find them. It's crazy. Check it. There's a saucer. Here's a saucer. And isn't it interesting how some daisies go up and some cave in? I don't know why that happens. That's a very good question if someone asked it. But we're just going to draw what we see. And I will say, when you see me draw the leaves to these daisies, there are over 20,000 species of daisies, and I really tried to find a consistent leaf shape for these, but nope, there's not one. So I would definitely just do what you feel like. Okay, so in this class, we're going to do the 3/4 view of a daisy, but first I'm going to show you the front view of the daisy so that you know what that'll look like as it's being turned into the 3/4 view. And here's the center of disc florets. And one of the things about daisies is you want to make sure that all the petals start from the outside and go towards the center. So sometimes you'll see that it's really easy to draw them and then be like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't really make sense. And then if you suddenly start course correcting, these all look a little bit off, right? So you just want to make sure that your petals all come from this center point, right? And not like this. So a way that you can do that is you can give yourself some guidelines, right? So you've got your center, and you can do something like this. Right? And what I would recommend doing is doing that and then making the petal sit between two of those lines. That would be a really nice way to contain your... Because it's another thing that's really easy to do on flowers is if there's a ton of petals, you could easily not like go all the way around and then not leave room for that last petal. And so you want to make sure you get all of them in there, you know? I don't know what's going on here. It's just a sketch. Let's pretend like I did that on purpose. And then smell. Okay, that's it for the daisy class. Bye. Just kidding. So this is how I would do the front view of a daisy. The other thing you'll notice is there's these vertical lines that kind of go from the lower part of that petal to the top. So I tend to do one or two, but if you look close to the petals on a daisy, there's probably a lot more. But I just think simplify as much as possible. And, you know, you're just kind of giving the indication of things. A lot of times when you're drawing, you're not trying to, like, unless you're a realist artist and you're definitely drawing everything super realistically from life, then that's different. But yeah, I tend to, you know, make indications of things. It's part of that whole process of deciding what information is the most important. What things do you choose to leave out, and what things do you choose to leave in and emphasize? All right, let's do this 3/4 view of a daisy. So when I do a 3/4 view of a daisy, I start with that center. You know, you can consider that the center of this bowl, right? And then if we're doing a 3/4 view, 3/4 is, you know, halfway between top view and side view. And there's also the 3/4 view from the bottom to the side. But I love 3/4 view with daisies because it's so dynamic. I'm trying to make sure you see what I'm drawing. Okay. Okay, that's kind of what I'm drawing for my original sketch, right? So you see how this is kind of foreshortened. It's getting kind of squished and larger as it gets close to you. And then this is kind of elongated as it's going back into space. So that is what I'm going to draw. Okay. Kind of like an egg that the yolk is kind of like falling off the edge. Okay. So now that you see that, then you'll see how I kind of do the petals. So I kind of do just a quick little collection of lines that are radiating from that center and start. This is where things get a little crazy. So here you can do that, or you can even shorten it a little bit more and bring up a petal to show that it's folded. Right? So without all the sketch lines, that would look like this. Okay, so that is how I draw a 3/4 view of a daisy. Next, I'm going to show you the sketch that I already have prepared, and then I will start inking and show you kind of some tips for that too. Before we start inking, I wanted to show you a few other ways that you could draw daisies. So sometimes when you have a foreshortened, 3/4 view of the daisy, the petals will kind of break the rules of things getting squished and smaller in the, or wider in the foreground, because sometimes the petals will be kind of growing up or down. So this is an example of that. And the same thing here, you've got your foreshortened petals here, and then one of them decided that they wanted to take a nap, so they're kind of drooping down here. And then another thing is sometimes you'll have like a wilted flower, and so you might not see any of the petals back here because all of them are kind of facing downwards. One thing I wanted to note is that if you're drawing flowers from life, you can always pluck one petal out, and that'll make a little more of a realistic look to it. That happens, sometimes bees take off with petals, you never know. And you might have some scenarios where all of your foreground petals are not so much squished from being foreshortened, but they'll just be a little bit wider than the ones back here, which I didn't do in the sketch, but that should have happened. And what's neat about this view is that you can, draw your base and then have these petals in front of it, and it will give it a little bit of depth. And so you'll kind of just see your base poking through these little petals. Same thing here. This is like a still growing daisy, and it hasn't, released its glory yet. So it's kind of just all doing that. All right. Anyway, I hope that helps. So the way that I've been doing this series is teaching you how to draw with just a simple pen that has a consistent line weight. I love the Tombow mono drawing pens, and I use the size 8. And what's nice about this is that it's also waterproof, so I can add in wet media afterwards and it won't bleed. And then so you'll see me draw the flower, which you could leave as is. And then I also add in some thick and thins just to give the artwork a little more dimension. It's kind of like that brush pen effect, but without having to have a brush pen on hand. And brush pens are also one of those things that you really have to practice a lot with because of the pressure sensitivity. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so first I start off with, in this daisy scenario, I'm kind of doing one that's got like a bowl shape. So just think of a bowl, facing down onto the petals. All right, and then I next start inking the petals. And this is important to have I would definitely have the sketch of all of your petals. Sometimes I just start adding the petals into the, the bounding box sketch, and I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna work, Sarah. One thing about daisies is they often have these little notches at the end of the petal. You can choose to do that or not because they don't all necessarily have it. But I think it adds just a little bit of interest, and I like to use them. I also try to have a little gap in between my petals on a daisy because it seems to be the way that they usually roll. Okay, I made these two a little bit folded. And then here, I'm going to draw the underbelly. And then give that tiny little notch and make sure that you would follow this edge to know where to put the bottom of that petal, right? So, and the next one, and then this one's slightly from the side. I'm going to add just a couple of extra petals in the background. Some daisies have that, but this one's going to, because I want to have one coming down here and one here, just for a little more interest. You can take control of your drawing. That's something that took me a long time to, when you're illustrating something, you are creating a new reality. And so you kind of get to make up things. Now, what I'm doing right now with the center is I'm stippling it to give the illusion of those disc florets that are in the center of a daisy. You could totally just color this in with a yellow or like a yellow ochre kind of color. But if you're thinking of it as just a black and white image, it's just another technique that you can use to create the illusion of some kind of tiny circle shape that's being repeated, which that's usually what the disc florets look like. You can barely tell that they're flowers. So I'm just kind of giving the illusion of them being there. And on the center of daisies, there tends to be a darker area where it kind of goes in a little bit, so that's what that's doing right there. And then with stippling, you just kind of, the areas that are kind of lighter, you will spread the dots out. And then like here, if you really get into drawing nerd talk, this is kind of where the core shadow starts on a sphere. So that's why I'm making this edge a little bit darker. Stippling is really cool. You can actually use it for your center line details on the daisies too. So if that's something you want to do, you could totally do it that way. I tend to draw one or two lines that kind of go through my daisy. Okay, so now you're going to see me speed the video up so that I can get this stem done, and then I'll start adding in some thick and thin lines to give it a little more dimension. Okay, so from here I'm going to add some thickness to some of these areas. And what that'll do is give it a little more dimension or the feel of a brush pen. Now, line can always be used to indicate light and shadow, and it can also be used to indicate something that's lightweight and heavyweight. But here I'm just kind of using it as a stylistic choice. All right, so I will speed this video up. Okay, so now that I finished inking the drawing, here is that drawing with color added to it. I used the Tombow dual brush pens and just sort of started with the center, let that dry a little bit, and then I added some lavender to the rest of it. And then here's one where I drew the daisies first and then added different leaves from different kinds of daisies as sort of a decorative element. So anytime you're drawing from these flower videos, you can always just use the flower itself and not necessarily the stem part of the flower. And this could be really easily turned into like the border on, you know, a part of your bullet journal or on a wedding sign. There's just so many things you can do with it. Here is a daisy using a brush pen. This is typically how I work. You know, if you follow my illustration work, you'll see a lot of this thicker brush pen stuff. And then there's this one where I drew it with Tombow dual brush pens. And then I like washed water all over it, let that dry, and then I came back in with a brush pen to bring back the details. And then this is a little bit more of an elegant pair of daisies. They kind of have more movement and they just feel slightly more realistic to daisies. And then I added lavender into the drawing, which makes no sense, and that's how I like it. All right, so I really hope you enjoyed this daisy tutorial. I am having such a blast doing this. Please post your drawings to the Instagram hashtag Watts Floral Series so that I could see your drawings and nerd out about it. And then also, if you could hit the subscribe button and a thumbs up, I would be so thankful. I have so many ideas for this channel. So yeah, I would love to have you join me and keep growing the channel. All right, I'll see you on the next video.